Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Inept General, and today I am joined by a highly esteemed guest, none other than Lionheart. And today we are doing a video on our wish list for the features in Total War Warhammer 2. Welcome, Lionheart.
Hello. Thank you for, well, bringing to this collaboration together. Talk through our
it's brilliant to have you on board. I figured we'd need very much an expert on all things ever Total War, and I could think of none better than yourself, really. Because my history with Total War itself has been a bit spotty. I was on board for everything early doors, from sort of Rome through Shogun through Medieval. I think I fell off around Empire, and then I missed Attila, but I got Rome 2 late, so I missed all the problems with Rome 2.
Yeah.
So there are some gaps in my knowledge there.
So you got a really nice Rome 2 experience then.
Yeah, exactly. For me, I never understood what all the fuss was about.
Yeah. I mean, at the very least, at least with Rome 2, credit to CA, they stuck with it until it was at the Emperor Edition. Yeah. But
that's exactly where I jumped in. So I was like, oh, okay.
To be fair, you missed Empire as well, which is basically Empire is where Rome 2 was kind of at launch. It's still broken. Sadly, it only got 5 patches and it never really addressed.
Never really picked up again.
Yeah, I think it was just a very over-ambitious project, and they've only kind of started addressing that
with gunfire. And I've seen some Empire. Empire, I think, is the only one I've never played because I think that just the time period was never of huge interest to me.
Yeah,
but the naval combat always looked fascinating with the kind of sort of height of the British Empire, naval ships and stuff like that.
I think the scale of Empire, just the 3 theaters of war, was just such a massive draw for me, and those naval battles, as you said. So I mean, kind of off topic, but fingers crossed, I'm hoping for a Victoria Total War at some point as a kind of Empire 2 type.
Indeed, a lot of hot debate on what the next historical a lot of rage as well.
Yeah, I guess it's probably we need to reiterate a historical Total War is coming, guys. It is happening.
Yes, it is.
There's 5 teams at CA all doing Total War stuff.
Warhammer and the history.
Yeah, and it's totally fine. It's allowed. It's not forbidden love. It's not a Romeo and Juliet thing where it's just like, I love Warhammer and historical Total Wars.
Exactly. I can't have war. I can't like them both.
It's totally fine.
Right. Well, let's maybe swing back on topic before we go on the general rant. So I thought we'd kick off with the very obvious things that people have been mentioning since the first, like even some of the first clips of Total War Warhammer emerged. And let's start off with the most obvious of all, sieges in Total War Warhammer 2. What are your kind of hopes and aspirations for sieges in Total War Warhammer 2?
I mean, if money wasn't a thing, then I would like them to scrap the current sieges and build them from the ground up again, and really invest heavily in custom, settlement maps. I mean, modders have come in with the map tools recently and shown that fantastic settlement maps are totally possible. Okay, they're not in a siege environment, but it is such a shame when you compare those made by the community to what we actually get for a siege, which is fine, I would say, the first time you play a campaign. You sink into the rhythm of it and it's fine. But to know that every single siege is going to be that one or corner wall approach, and that is it, I'm so disappointed with that, because as well there's fantastic art and scenery way off in the distance, floating turrets and castles. It's just kind of like, what was the point of doing all that detail if I can't interact with it? I can look at it, sure, and it's nice, but I want to touch it. I want to fight over those streets and those gates and keeps and things. So
I'm with you completely.
Yeah,
I mean, my only argument would be that, I mean, I'll maybe point this out, because I think you and I will probably both take a realistic approach. We understand there are limitations to game development, so this isn't going to be our completely out of the blue, infinite money resources.
Reeling myself back in to sort of say, obviously I would love for them to build it up from the start and go back to more an Attila style siege scenario with just, the custom crazy settlements that Warhammer has. I appreciate that that's not something they're going to do over the trilogy, because essentially that they're standalone expansions, and there isn't going to be that room to from the ground up redevelop a core part of the game. What I hope,
and because they spoke a lot about sort of AI development during that as well.
Yeah,
they essentially had so many problems with AI.
Yeah.
I think maybe the Rome engine, that they had to kind of start all over again. That's why we got the sieges we did.
I mean, it's very much a function over form choice. They'd rather have functioning AI that knows how to defend a wall and then withdraw from a wall and try and hold a city than they would an AI that derps about in the middle of a square, 15, you know, paths and choke points back, and it can't work out how to get over 3 different wall levels. Yeah. I actually fully supported that when we saw the early siege and stuff like that. I was a huge advocate of saying, you know what, no, I want functioning AI and functioning pathfinding rather than overcomplicated sieges. The thing is, you then play it and you realise that's dull. Insanely dull for sieges. And in fact, I would rather have a derpy AI and a derpy pathfinding, but fantastic woven streets and paths and various layers. So, yeah.
I mean, I'm not overly familiar with the Attila one. I mean, the one I go to in my mind is Medieval 2. And the kind of the layered different fortresses.
I think Medieval 2 is
the overcomers.
Yeah, I mean that didn't really. All that happened with Attila was basically that they added they added something siege escalation. Basically, if you sieged it for say 3 turns, parts of the wall would start falling down. 5 turns, towers would start coming down, and after like 8 turns or something, the city would look like it's been sieged out for a long year or 2. It's burning, it's on fire, it's rubble, and I thought that was bloody brilliant because
I do like the sound of that.
It's more immersion to siege experiences. So it's a shame to see that. I hope that the historical team saw what the Warhammer team were doing and went, no, that's not what we're doing. No, please don't copy them. But yeah, so what I would like to see in Warhammer 2 is taking the siege that we currently have, the one wall approach. I mean, it's not going to change, or the corner wall approach, but add a second layer, or maybe it's a bit too hopeful to ask for a third layer as well, but add more layers going back. If they're insistent on having this one wall approach of this function over form approach, sure, have it so that the AI knows it can only attack forward and it has to go forward, the towers hit it, but once you get over that first wall, have another wall slightly further back, you know, create inner keeps on, especially if you've got a tier 6 city. It makes no sense to me that a tier 6 city or tier 5 city looks exactly the same as a tier 1 city with walls, as it were.
They can just lob cows at you now instead.
Yeah, it's just the towers have been upgraded, and I mean, I don't like the tower situation either. I think there should be give them a stupidly
sort of safety area,
give them a stupidly long range, sure, but at least make it so you can have artillery that fires over. Otherwise, it just gets sniped all the time. I think realistically, you know, with budget and what they can do, and I know, you know, the developers have sort of said, yeah, we are looking at sieges. We know it's a you know a discussion point within the community. They're not, you know, super happy with how they are. I hope that they just try and add more to what's already there. You know, it's as much as we'd like it, it's way too far out to expect them to redevelop it and build it up, or switch back to say Attila, because it's not, as much as we say switch back, it's not. There's no switch to go back to the previous siege model. So I just hope they add more. They make the maps kind of longer, going further back, so there's just more to do, more layers. I think, you know,
the only thing I'd say, sort of touching on a point you made earlier, is I'd agree with you on the point of the kind of, I'd sacrifice a derpier AI for those changes, but also that opens the door a little bit, if we accept the derpier AI, to open up the siege customization options to the custom map editor, and give the customizers options to have proper walls that you can put people on, and allow the AI maybe to get a bit derpy. But I think just the amount of variety that would provide us with sieges alone would be very well worth it.
And I'm sure we'll probably talk about it a bit later when we talk multiplayer-wise. But the thing is as well, and I know Total War always primarily focuses on the single-player development because they are primarily single-player games. Sure, they have multiplayer, but it's never, you know, it doesn't take off anywhere near as much as the single-player. Now, maybe that's through its own inherent problems, and I'm sure we'll discuss that further down the line in the video. But I think I'd like to see sieges, you know, add those more layers, just so that when you are playing, so that you actually, I can't remember the last time I ever had someone say, you know what, let's play a siege battle together on Warhammer, because it's boring. It's like, there is no why that you've got OP towers and I get shot to pieces and it's not fun. So I would love them to add more layers, because I want people to say, let's do a cool siege battle and verse each other. We don't have to worry about the AI. You know, we can do it ourselves. And I think
multiplayer sieges are a rarity.
Yeah,
you ever see them at all.
there just aren't any. Yeah, it is all open field battles because there is just no interest in those sieges. I mean, that is where people go. Let's have crazy, broken AI pathfinding all these intricate streets, because me as a player, I can manage that.
I mean, the craziest it gets is like, oh, there's 2 gates instead of 1.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
so
Ooh, double gates, no!
Yeah, so moving on from kind of sieges, I think we kind of agree we are willing to sacrifice derpiness for just a bit more variety and to make them a bit more interesting on the sieges element. But building on kind of the map variety, I've mentioned here that I'd love to see a return of kind of bridge or river battles. I mean, last time I remember, I have this, it's just because maybe in my head, this is maybe a bit nostalgic of me, but I have these great memories of Shogun 1, where you used to be able to put the Sword Saint, I think the unit was, and just put him on a bridge and just watch him go to town for an age and watch him almost defend the bridge single-handedly while they were firing arrows at your guys from across the water. And I'd just like another element of that, just speaking to the variety of maps available in Total War.
Well, I mean, yeah, just more variety seems to be already a massive point of what we want to see. We just want, you know, don't need to change anything too substantially, but just more variety, more options, and I think that's going to be a running theme with a lot of our discussion. But yeah, I mean, I've been going back recently and been playing a lot of Third Age for Medieval 2, and you know, having the choke point, the bridge battles, the river crossing, I think to me as well, another point I like bringing into this, I don't think we actually had it, but talking about sieges, but talking about I bloody miss unwalled siege battles, like town battles. Like,
yeah.
I thought they've missed a massive trick in the book of, you know, creating, you would normally use a small unwalled village, you'd use the little streets to create choke points.
And towns, yeah.
You create choke points and you could take on larger armies. You might not win, but you could kill more of them because you could funnel them into small choke points to get to the village centre square. And it's actually something I said on day one to one of the CA community team, because they were sort of saying, what, you know, how would you rate the game, sort of thing. And I sort of said about 7 out of 10. That's kind of how I feel, and I think that's being maybe a smidge generous, but 7 out of 10. I like it's a basis for where we're going. I know there's a trilogy, so hopefully it's only going to get better. And I'd been talking to the community team before this, and their first response was, is it because there's no unwalled cities? And I was like, partly yes. It just irks me that something that seems like, you know, just put a couple of buildings about and that's an empire city, put a couple of bits and that's a green skin camp, you know, put a little bit there and that's a dwarven mining expedition, you know.
I'm with you. Some of my favorite experiences from Rome 2 was when you're like, okay, I don't have a walled city here, but I can still maybe put up a defense.
Exactly, yeah. Because you'd move your pikes and put them in between buildings, and you're like, right, that is a wall. Put another one in that gap. That's a wall. And it's just I don't want different, because otherwise there's open field battles and there's sieges, and I now rarely fight a siege battle. I either sally out from it or I auto resolve it just because it's the same thing.
And I think to a point, I think because it also gives you, if you have unwalled sieges, it also gives you the option of maybe not needing walls in some of your settlements. I don't know about you, but when I play campaign, particularly if I don't have all these cities in a province, I know I need to build walls because it will rebel and I won't be able to fight off the rebellion without walls. Whereas if you introduce those, I'd at least maybe roll the dice on not building a wall structure.
Yeah, because you at least know there's some terrain feature that you can use as a defense, aka the town square, the buildings around it. You know, you can utilize that. And yeah, because there's 2 battle modes, siege and open field battle. And that's not enough. Okay, you got ambush battles on top of that. Okay, so there's 3. I guess you could say Beast Pass are different to that, but you know, even those are pretty lacking in variety and change. I think there's 1 ambush map for the Wood Elves or something like that. It's just the same every time. There's 1 or 2 Beastmen ones. It's just more of those sorts would be what I would want to see. Just expand it a little bit, especially because we've now got the Grand Campaign map mod that can import battle maps that modders have made, so they can create river battles because they can use the geotag locations on the Grand Campaign to be like, if a battle happens here, it's this map. So it can happen. I appreciate this is always the constant, you know, the developers are going to be like, we would love to do this, but we don't have the time or the budget. But I kind of feel that now that they're building up these standalone expansions, this is the time to start, you know, eking these, you know, extra variations and little extra modes here and there that can be done.
Thing, I think where there are some in slightly uproar amongst the community that it is being called a sequel, and I think the features we're talking about today are kind of the things that you can add between these games to really earn the name a sequel. Whereas my biggest fear, and this is me putting on my pessimist hat for a second, is that it is just the extra races and then the rest of the game is exactly the same, which I really hope isn't the case. That's sort of my biggest worry about Total War.
I mean, I would honestly, if that was the case, then I would honestly be like, why is it taking so long to come out? You know, because you know, they would have started development on that pretty soon. Well, it would have been in development essentially before Warhammer 1 came out.
Yeah.
They would have been working with the base. I mean, that's the beauty of this trilogy, is that they've already got the base game. Warhammer 1 is the basis. They add up from there. So it shouldn't, unless we were going to get Warhammer 2 now, and at the end of the year Warhammer 3, that is, I would say, probably the development time they would probably need to do the extra models and add the races in. But they're taking longer than that. I mean, they've said 2017. I personally think September, October sort of time.
Yeah.
They're going to be at E3 doing something there. So I imagine that will start teasing more and showing more.
We're probably guessing Skaven reveal, aren't we?
Yeah, I think they're doing a very similar to the Vampire Counts marketing sort of campaign they had there, where they waited right to the end. Everyone was like, "Oh, we can see the vampires, they're there," and it's like, "No, you can't see anything." It's like with the Skaven, it's like Skaven don't exist. No, don't ignore the markings on the logo and on the end of the trailer and things like that. No. But that will come out later. Yeah. But yeah, I think
Well, we'll touch on sort of the races and stuff a little bit later.
They've got to be adding more. That's the thing. It can't just be a race pack. Because they would already have done it. You know, they'd be like, "Here's more DLC. Here's the races. You know, here's more map." So that gets me excited about this. And I would say yes, they're standalone expansions, but this is a trilogy of 3 kind of dedicated games. That you can as well. You can pick up Warhammer 2 just on its own. You don't need to have Warhammer 1. You can pick up Warhammer 3 eventually and just play that on its own. So yes, they are standalone expansions, but I think they're more almost like just the standalone games just within that same, you know, that running series, that trilogy is what I'm hoping they are, with their own unique features. You know, the Vortex campaign, that's its own thing, narrative stuff going on there. And that's kind of, I hope it's a nice, full, meaty chunk of content.
Yeah, exactly. I'm with you. But sort of getting back on track with some of the other things. So these are, essentially what we're going through is going through a list of our things that we hope are these features that will be included. The next one I have on our list is formations. Now, we've seen some formations with Bretonnia. Now, I might be breaking a few people's hearts here, because I don't have an encyclopedic knowledge of all the army books. But Bretonnia, we did see... Britannia, we did see some formations, but those formations have appeared with special sets of rules in the army book. So it makes me slightly skeptical. And as far as I'm aware, there's no other real formations that jump off the front of my head in other army books for other units. There may be, but do drop it in the comments. I'm sure you will if there are. But nothing that's jumping to my mind. So I liked seeing the formations of cavalry. And I really hope to see some more formations, even if it was just maybe a formation for animation's sake. Like, one thing I find quite weird about particularly using spearmen and anti-large stuff is, unlike in sort of previous Total War games where you'd maybe see pikemen and stuff line up and then you know they're braced, is you're not 100% sure if they made the brace or not, if you're getting that benefit. But with some of if they ever do introduce sort of Estalia and Tilia, we will get pikemen there, and hopefully they will institute some of the formation stuff. But yeah, it's just one of those areas that people talk about a lot, but just because of and in some ways I applaud it. In some ways, yes, I'd love to see formations. I'd love to see Thunderers making square, for example. That would be a great thing, like their charge defense. I
think now it's kind of the point, it's like, why can't we have formations? They've shown it's doable. We've got, you know, lance formation with the Bretonnian cavalry, you know, the wedge. I want loose formation just added back into missile units, because
that would be great,
that just makes on a tactical level itself, you know, just makes sense. If you're going through a skirmish phase, you're gonna want to go to loose formation to minimize your casualties, so you can skirmish at the enemy archers or what have you, while you advance up with your infantry. And I think maybe a bracing stance with the shield wall. I mean, we saw in the trailer kind of the high elves, they sort of lock up shields a little bit combined with the spell.
I'd love to see a shield wall.
just a shield wall, or just like shield brace for, say, the Bretonnian spearmen at arms, because they're not as, you know, elite high tier level sort of thing. They can just do a bracing, you know, that's one thing I do like about pressing like pike wall on Rome 2, is that there's a pause, the pikes drop down, and then they brace, and they just like, and you're like, oh yeah, that's good, that's satisfying. There's like something.
Think that's it. It's a satisfactory element that you want there in those formations. One thing I also would like to see is I can't remember the name of it, but with sort of missile cavalry, they used to do that beautiful kind of circle running.
Oh, is it like contraband circle or something like that. Yeah, doing the
I'd love to see that with some of the missile. Particularly, I'd like to see it with some of the missile flying units because it always bothers me that eagles just kind of float there.
Yeah,
and at least you get like some locomotion, some laws of physics going on.
Maybe it's just so the elves just don't get like motion sick, like bobbing around, like stay still, Beaky. I'm trying to shoot him.
Whereas I'd love to see them sort of flying in a circle, like firing off and taking
some
turns.
extra skirmish modes would be nice. Just thinking actually about like just the basic shield brace. I wonder if maybe that's just something they could incorporate into when you enable guard mode. If you hit guard mode, just have them so they just do an extra little tough brace. Maybe even just give them like a +2 melee defense when you do it as well, as an extra point of they'll just like a stand your ground thing. They'll just stand there because that's what guard mode does. They don't chase after units once they've finished the engagement, which is so you can hold your battle lines, hold your formation. So maybe just tie that into guard mode because that's a feature I think could just overlap and make it one feature.
Absolutely.
At least guard mode is back.
The other thing I was going to say, this is something that I've seen actually kind of die away a little bit in the community as far as complaints go, because maybe people are getting used to it, but I still want longer battles and sort of longer combat. And combat just lasts not too much longer. I don't want sort of necessarily hour-long battles, but maybe half-hour battles, something around that area, rather than just battles that can still, in theory, be completely wiped up in sort of 5-10 minutes even.
Yeah, it's weird. I think we kind of see this with every Total War when it comes out, and then as the balancing goes in, you know, battles end up, I think, normally getting slightly longer because normally like defense stats and leadership or morale
goes up,
slowly increases. When I first started playing Warhammer, it was like, yeah, these seem very quick, these battles, and now I can sometimes feel like I'm having a good 10-15 minute, you know, full 20 versus 20 stack battle, and that's satisfying to me. I don't know if that's because I'm used to the, you know, I've got my monstrous creatures here coming in for a smash, and once they smash in, you know, that is breaking people's morale. There's no two ways about it.
And you'd be annoyed if it didn't, really.
Yeah, exactly. I kind of feel like they're nearly there. Just add another 5 minutes. And that'd be peachy then. That'd be
just a little
cracking.
Just
a smidge longer. I don't want, you know, I don't want to basically be playing battles for the whole episode I'm making a Let's Play on. You know, I'm normally about half an hour long. I like to get a little bit of campaign done. I'm be playing a lot of Rome 2 with Naval Empire at the moment, and that really, I'm having to use their. They've done a series of submods for the battles, and I'm using their fastest one of like super fast battles because by default DEI slows battles down so much. They can take like a normal 15-minute battle can take nearly an hour.
Oh wow!
And it's because the morale just slowly chips down. The animation damage and stuff is very minimized. I mean, it's great to watch and look at, but Christ, if you've you know got a bus to catch or something, you want this done you know 2 years ago. So yeah, not to that extent. Please don't follow that, but just a little bit longer, please. Indeed. A little bit longer.
Now, a big one next. We're sort of moving on to sort of the most obvious ones, to ones that maybe, well, I suppose this is actually quite an obvious one as well, but it's just kind of tipping an existing system, which is regional occupation. Now, we already know they're kind of chucking regional occupation as such, and I have to thank one of my watchers, a chap called Justin, who messaged me actually and gave me a Reddit thread where Grace from the community team was saying that it's a way, it will be no more regional occupation, but there will be areas where different races do better. Now, she didn't go into much more detail than that. I myself put up a video a little while ago hoping that the thing they'd use, rather than just a hard, like humans and undead can live in human settlements, dwarves and greenskins can only live in these, was a kind of population control.
Yeah.
And population is affected positively or adversely depending on the environment the settlement's in. Now, that was always my idea, and I think that works very well. So, like, humans can live in the Badlands, but you wouldn't really want to.
Yeah,
so population goes up very slowly.
I think it just highlights the fact that, and I've seen a lot of the community ask for it as well, they need to put in an actual visible population mechanic back into the games. We used to have it in like Medieval 2. You'd have your population that would dictate how you could upgrade settlements, which makes perfect sense. And I think, you know, from a lore wise, you know, those that defend the law to, you know, to what's the word I'm using, the phrase to I want to say to the Bible, but that's not right, to the
to scripture then.
To scripture, yeah, that's what I'm looking for. Those that, take it as scripture, that, you know, the Empire would never want to settle in the Badlands. That's fine. You don't need to go there. But if you go, you know what, let's try an expedition, see if we can set up a human outpost, because that sounds like something that could be in the realms of possibility in Warhammer. You know, these heroes of old wanting to perhaps create a human outpost, and the premise of that was that, you know, as Grayson hinted at that thing, is that they do well in certain places. The humans would do very badly in the Badlands, so basically they'd only get, say, +10 population per turn, rather than their normal one of +250 if they were in rich, fertile grasslands.
Yeah.
And it would just take longer to build up, and maybe you would only be able to build up to, say, a tier 2 settlement there permanently, because it's not your native environment, but you could build there. I've seen a lot of people say, why can't we have a wood elf mechanic where you can conquer everywhere, but anywhere outside of your traditional zone is just an outpost? Because that would also potentially make sense.
Well, my problem with the wood elf one was that it was too limiting. I don't think they should have necessarily limited the structures ad hoc on the one tier basis. Like, if you want to push through and invest agents and invest time and money, I think you should be able to build up settlements a little bit beyond that. And that's the kind of main problem I had with the Wood Elf system. I like the idea of that, and it sort of opened the door to them obviously being aware that regional occupation wasn't going to be long-term. It was our first kind of hint at that. But the Wood Elf one, it's because I like the idea of their general concept of the game in Total War Warhammer 2. You can kind of see what they're going for. They don't want you, and lore-wise, it kind of fits. They don't want you to take on the task of defeating evil by yourself. They want you to make alliances. Now, yes, admittedly, sometimes the AI is a bit derpy and isn't the best ally to have necessarily. But the concept being that they want you to make alliances with the different races of order, let's say if you're playing as the good guys, and work together to make this happen. And I think the Wood Elf one kind of hinted at that same ideal. And I don't necessarily see them moving away from that ideal, really. I don't really see them making it sort of blanket easy. And I think Wood Elves actually maybe went a little bit too far in this direction, making it easy to just conquer the whole place.
Yeah, I think it should have been tougher. And I think maybe with those outposts, it would have been nice to have a small sense of, oh, there's a couple of tiers to these outposts as well, and you can specialize them in different ways depending on their location a bit more. It's interesting to see when they do add in, when we've added in all these DLC factions and DLC updates, it's interesting to see, actually, I think we can actually see glimmers of the next game they're working on, the next Warhammer game, because they as you said, you can sort of feel like maybe they were suggesting they were going in that direction with the Wood Elves, and it'll be interesting to see what the actual system is like in Warhammer 2, and if that's taken any, because I kind of, in a way, feel that, like the horde mechanic system, we've seen that all the way back from like Attila. Basically they went, oh, let's have hordes, and I love how you can see these creeping Total War features, going all the way back to the original, the first games, creeping through and being altered and changed. That's why I like, seeing as they add more content in. With Original Occupation now, I kind of wonder why just they had that mod available at launch. Why not just put it in as a game option and it's just a switch? You choose, just build it in, because it's not like it's time consuming to make that feature. It's a bit of code that switches between basically hard locking, your race's settlements that you can or can't capture, and not locking them.
What surprised me most about it in general, and the fact that they didn't come up with kind of a population-based system at first, was that they knew they were making a trilogy. Yeah, like they knew this sort of
that seems like something you need to have in the base version of a trilogy. Would make
sense in the long run of the game, so that makes it a bit trickier to understand necessarily why they made that decision. But I'm looking forward to what they see there. As I said, I'm hoping on a kind of population-based system. So
I think it's the best way forward, and I think even if they don't do it here in Warhammer, whatever the historical team's working on, population is something that is relevant throughout any historical era, no matter the location. If you're building up an empire that is fueled by human people, you need population. You need a way of monitoring that. So I kind of hope that whether it's not in Warhammer, if it's in historical stuff going forward, population is as core a mechanic as income. That's what it needs to be. It is the same thing to me.
And I might get a lot of hate for this, because I think a lot of people who were just raging at the beginning about regional occupation have been won round to the extent that they maybe are more accepting of not necessarily saying you can't have this settlement, but saying, in all, you're not going to get the most out of this settlement. Maybe you try and encourage the dwarves to take it, and they'll maybe get better. And I like to think most people are kind of slightly accepting of that element of the game.
I think as well, just a lot that were really against it just don't care anymore. They've just got on, they've played their campaigns, they've gone, oh, it sucks that I can't take this, but I'm going to go kill this orc over here. I've got other things to do.
A quick little one then, battle results. I put this one in because...
I love that you put this one in, because this is the same gripe I have. I'm like, why? There was a mod you had to get for Attila to add this back in, and there hasn't been one for Total War Warhammer. I don't know know if it's just because it's different or whatever, but why? Why?
I know, we're just wanting to see sort of total kills, and I kind of see. I think they're going for more of a kind of Overwatch. It's all positive results kind of thing, so you can't like beat your teammate. Oh, mate, you didn't get enough kills. But I get that argument. That's not what this game is.
No, you want to look at the stats. I want my viewers need to tell me how much I screwed up by friendly firing my own guys, and they can't do that without the total kills on my side. Damn it!
I think for mostly battle results, more stats the better.
Yeah, please.
Or at least give me like an option to dig in a bit, make it a click.
I've been at CA so many times and said and talked to like various developers and said, why isn't that there? And I went, I don't really know. There's not like it's not like it was a feature that like went, you know what, that's a really controversial feature that. You know, I'm not sure about that one. It's not even. It's not even a time-consuming thing. The data for collecting and showing total kills is probably under there. It just doesn't have anywhere to be displayed. So just do it. Why? Why don't we? Why don't we get a total kills counter? It makes no sense. I cannot understand it.
That's one, and also the fact that when on the campaign now you can't even see the stats they do show on some of the other stuff. So hopefully that gets fixed. I know it used to cause some crashes for some people.
You know what I want as well is on battle results. Stop taking me straight back to the campaign map. Make me click continue from the stats because I haven't bloody finished reading them. Because
make it timed.
I mean, okay, it's my fault for putting a ruddy SSD in my PC, so now the battles load really quickly. I don't have time to look at the stats.
Exactly.
They're gone. I want to look at them and then hit continue. Like, make me hit continue to go back to the campaign.
And the fact that you do have to hit continue in the multiplayer, it just makes it like, so there's a system in there already.
I can do this, but why? Multiplayer, single player teams, talk together.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, but I think we both agreed on that.
Yeah. CA, seriously, sort it. What are you doing?
Okay, now we've had confirmation about no naval combat in this iteration of the game, which seems to hint that we're probably not going to have naval combat in this one at all. Now, any sort of regular visitors to my channel know I did a whole series on the possible ships and boats we could have had in naval combat. And there are some great ones. There's essentially a massive disco ball that spoots out like drug-filled smoke that makes people hallucinate on the Slaneshi Navy. And there's a Nurgle one that just kind of spreads disease over your ships. It would have been amazing to see. But I understand that maybe people have argued two ways. Either they couldn't secure the license to a separate board game called Man of War, which is the naval combat game.
That's what I was going to say,
based in the Warhammer universe, because they're making that kind of Assassin's Creed-esque Man of War boat ship, sort of third-person action game. Now, that's kind of less true to the game Man of War than anything that Creative Assembly would have come up with, which is the bizarre thing. But that might be a reason. It might just be they didn't want to do it. They were concentrating on other things.
Yeah, because I guess they'd have to create their own versions, their own models of inspired Warhammer naval stuff. Because there is a Man of War game now out in early access, so I guess that would have clashed, and Games Workshop were like, no. I mean,
my question was always going to be, did they get the exclusive license? Because there's like 3 or 4 40K games at any given moment.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering
about
that.
It's like just a big problem in a way that Games Workshop literally just kind of like how Marvel did with all the film rights originally to all the different studios. They went, here, everyone have a bit of something. And it's like, that's great when everyone's going, I'm going to make this really specific niche thing about this aspect of the game. When someone like Total War wants to go, we do land battles and we've been recently doing naval battles. Oh, well, you can't do them. Oh, why? Stop. Give them the full thing. I mean, CA's not excuse, but reasoning is that Warhammer Fantasy Battles is primarily land stuff,
which is strictly true.
Strictly true, but it kind of sounds a little bit weak.
It's
just
part of a wider universe.
Because the thing is, if it is the licensing thing, then we're not just saying we just don't have the license for that portion of the universe.
But then maybe they feel like that's putting the blame on Workshop, and
they're like, though. They fucked up. Stop.
So, but I think, but what they have said is they are putting naval mechanics in the game. Now, the reason, for those of you who don't necessarily know, who haven't sort of seen my naval combat or aren't necessarily aware, the reason everyone thought naval combat was going to be in the second iteration of the game is because the High Elves and the Dark Elves have a very large focus on navy. The High Elves more for trade and exploration, the Dark Elves because they like raiding and pillaging and pirating, and that's how they make most of their money. So I'm trying to think what they mean by naval mechanics they'll introduce, and I have to just imagine that will probably take the form of a raiding stance with a navy that the Dark Elves have. Now, the problem with that I have is that if you set up off the shores of Bretonnia with your navy and you start raiding, then you're just going to have to start building armies which are all just like peasant spam just to build up your auto-resolve strength and then get them out, go out to sea. And there's no real strategy there. It's just you're building terrible armies that you have no intention to fight with properly at any point, and you're just going out to deal with the problem of a raiding Dark Elf army.
Yeah. I mean, also, if there's ways of, you know, just creating a big raiding stack, you do it with the cheapest land unit you can.
Yeah,
pop
exactly.
them on
That's
the
what
sea.
I'm saying. Yeah, so you just get this swordman spam, or
it's just
like
spam. Just like the treasure stacks that you had in like Shogun 2 and things like that. You could just pop whatever you wanted into it, cheapest ones, or an Empire, the cheapest ships, pop them all on a trader, and you get all the money. And it wouldn't matter if you put higher quality ships in there, you still get the same amount. So you just put the cheapest ones in.
That's my fear there. So it's like, okay, well, hopefully it's more depth than that. But with what they're doing with the auto resolve, I don't see how they make it any different.
Yeah,
I don't see how that doesn't become a problem. But in terms of other mechanics, I'm not sure what else they could do unless they do something. I'm not sure if they've done this before in Total War. It's not jumping to my mind, but I know you used to have traders in some of the older versions of Total War. If you have to have like a trade ship and that starts a trade route that can be blocked or something like that, that might be a mechanic they throw. Yeah, merchants.
You'd pop them on resources and that would generate stuff. I think actually adding like a trade ship mechanic would be quite interesting. It would add another layer to it. Because I mean, with navies, they're not navies as such. They're just literally transport ships for your armies or whatever you're throwing out there, I guess, because they're going to avoid anything that could you know, not be within their license. I'm hoping that there'll be lots of maritime type events that will pop up, because we've seen that they're getting, you know, with each new DLC or Lord they release, they always add in a slight twist on the event mechanics, and that there's specific ones to, like Grombrindal's one, which will focus on which ancestor he's channeling and things like that. Yeah. So there might be, you know, maybe you pray to the god of the sea or whatever, and that gives you plus 20% trade for 5 turns or something like that. I think there'll be a lot of little events from the sea popping up and affecting it.
Like particularly for the elves, one hope.
Yeah, I imagine there'll be like deep sea attrition for your armies as well. Yeah. Because there is already that in the game as such, of areas of attrition on the high seas. So I think there might be more things to do with that. I'm kind of slightly disappointed because I didn't know a huge amount about what races to expect in Warhammer 2. My friend Moosey went through and told me about it's quite a minor thing, but it's pirate vampires. Yes,
there's a chap called Luther Harkon, who went out and is now just sort of raiding the coast.
Oh, really?
He has a zombie crew.
even on the like the you know, the smallest amount of budget that they can set stuff at, please just give them tri-corner hats and cutlasses, and I just want zombies like with just the hats. It's gonna be amazing. I want to do like zombie Jack Sparrow stuff. Just like,
well, I think
as Rumgon.
I think we will maybe bring this up later, because I think Luther Harkon will be the portal with which they reintroduce undead into the Total War Warhammer 2 map. Not the global overall map with game 1 and 2, but just the Vortex map.
Yeah, but just we'll adding in that corruption. Yeah, we'll come back to that. Yeah.
Okay, so Naval Mechanics, that's what we're expecting, a couple of things there, but a couple of things that may come with a few problems. I put next the magic boost. I'd like to see magic get a bit stronger. I understand why it was perhaps nerfed, not necessarily nerfed, but the strength it was at launch, because I think for Total War, sort of long-term Total War players, to have magic be able to almost turn the tide of a battle, a lot of people I could see be up in arms about it if that's how it launched. But I think now that people are maybe a bit more used to magic, you can kind of bring up the effects of magic spells a bit. And you see them doing that a little bit with some of the armor boost ones in the latest patch. But I think armor could do, particularly making like Gelt and Kemler a bit more viable. Those kind of legendary lords, those magic-focused lords, and making them a bit more useful.
The problem for me is that since launch, they've also... Magic doesn't scale. It's built on, I think, large unit size. So if you play on higher than that, the magic doesn't do as much damage to your units because they're a larger unit size.
Actually, that definitely needs to be addressed.
And they need that's something I can't believe it's this long and it's still not being addressed, because to me this kind of feels like a core thing of the magic, should scale to the unit size, and I'm sure that is a lot more work to rebalance it, because every spell has to then be rebalanced, and then you need to go through it. But I think that's something that needs to be kind of top of priority list, because I mean, I play at ultra size settings because I want to get the biggest battles I possibly can.
Yeah.
And basically, me playing at that is very detrimental to magic in the game. It makes it a lot less impactful. Vortex is, only Wind of Death basically is the only, I could say, super satisfying spell that I can still use at ultra because it still shreds through units. But yeah, magic needs. Definitely on ultra needs to be rebalanced and boosted, and I think maybe just cost more.
You can't imagine it's too hard to link a value of damage to like the setting of units.
Yeah, I mean, surely if you just link setting it to ultra means you just use the next rule set up of balances for magic. So just I don't know, maybe even just on a basic level, just go, if you choose ultra, that just adds +10 to all the magic spells or something like that in terms of damage output. Maybe just start there and then fine tune which spells are a bit OP or still underpowered then. And go from there.
Because I think when I say sort of a magic boost, there's a very specific reason I'm not picking specific laws. Like, a lot of people don't like the law of metal and think it's particularly weak. But no matter what you do, you're going to have some laws that are more powerful than others. So it's not necessarily, you're not going to have them all on even keel. But I think magic as a whole could do a bit more damage. And I think they are working on it. But yeah, that scaling issue is a huge thing as well. I definitely think they need to address in terms of magic. But moving on. I think the next one I wanted to address was the idea of legendary heroes. Now, there's a lot of fantastic characters in the Warhammer world. Now, I'm not sure how familiar you are with sort of army books and things like that, Lionheart.
Relative noob level.
But essentially, so you have characters who are in the army books generals, and for the most part, they've been the legendary lords. There are exceptions, like I believe Isabella is maybe a hero, but she's been made a legendary lord. But it just allows you to, economically as well, it just makes sense for Creative Assembly to introduce legendary lords, because we saw it with the Green Knight, but he's only temporary. But you have guys like Krell, and Kemmler and Krell are kind of the Laurel and Hardy if Laurel and Hardy were set on murder and raising the dead. But you get like cool little combos like that are just beloved by the Warhammer community that they could sell. I mean, they could do DLC packs with just 3 or 4 heroes in them alone and people would buy them. So it's baffling to me why there aren't sort of legendary heroes, and they've proven they can do it now. So hopefully we'll see legendary heroes more common in Total War Warhammer 2 without them necessarily needing to be generals. Because at some point you can't make too many generals, because no matter how much money you make, your economy won't be able to support that many armies. So that's an argument against sort of making them all generals. But yeah, for the heroes, I think I would love to see some more character-focused heroes coming into the game, particularly for the Dark Elves. They have some great sort of cloaked and really cloak and dagger assassins and things like that, who are characters who can come in, who I'm very much looking forward to seeing in Total War Warhammer 2. And I'm not sure what you're thinking is gameplay-wise, Lionheart, whether like legendary heroes might be a bit OP, because I think on the campaign map, I never really used the Green Knight on the campaign map very much. Did you ever get a chance to do that?
In my Britannia series that I'm doing at the moment, I'm 21 episodes in and I've still not used him, and I've got all 4 uses of him. I'm just going to use him probably for the final Errantry War battle, and maybe when I start pushing against Chaos. I mean, I'm just being hit by scaling and Varg forces.
People watching that are yelling at you every
episode. They're like, just use the Green Knight, and I'm kind of like, but then there's so many saying, no, just save him, and I'm like, oh, when do I bloody use him? Because it doesn't, like, nothing's got dire enough to make me go, I need him.
Yeah. I think I used him the first time very early on to take Mousillon.
I think that's probably when I should have done, but then, yeah, I kind of think I might just go, you know what, guys, in an episode's time, I'm just going to summon him, and I'm going to use him 15 turns, and if I don't end up using him in any key battle as well, that's my loss.
There you go.
I'm going to leave one use of him for the Errantry War battle at the end, and the other 2 use, I'm just going to use whenever I radically feel
Just label that episode, Are You Not Entertained?
Yeah, just don't entertained.
And the next issue on terms of sort of existing gameplay systems I wanted to address was artillery aiming. Now, this might just be me by myself, right? But the Chaos cannon, the Hell cannon, I like aiming for, particularly on campaign. It's a bit harder to do on multiplayer, but on campaign, I enjoy aiming it. But I do miss, I think it was Rome 2, where they gave you like where it was going to land, as well as you just sort of, you wouldn't have to like manually guess where it was going. So you'd see where catapults would land and stuff like, I think it was Rome 2, unless I'm talking out my arse. And I'd like them to bring that back, particularly maybe for cannon and maybe for some of the catapults as well. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I'd definitely like to see that back.
Because the cannon, I'm no good at aiming manually. Doom Diver's a bit nippier.
Yeah, I'd prefer the the splash zone of where it's going to go.
Yeah, rather than just sort of looking through line of sight, because trying to predict that flight path.
They kind of had this when they first introduced it, I think, in Shogun 2. And they had just like these, the levels of like your height levels on the reticule of firing yourself, and you're like, whereas with Rome 2 and Attila, you actually had like the red arc of where it was going to go and the relative splash zone. And it's kind of like that's so much better.
Yeah,
especially because I try and look up too high with a trebuchet and it doesn't go that high, or I look too low and it's just like you can't shoot, and I'm like, distance, why?
I think.
I don't understand. What I can't see properly where I'm aiming, so no wonder.
So yeah, that's a small one. I think that should be an easy one to implement if they're thinking about it. But maybe they thought that was a bit OP, because I'm pretty sure there are battles I won in Rome 2 just using the catapult and like a line of spearmen and just having their armies smash against my spearmen, but being able to aim so accurately that I'd just be wiping out sort of regiments at a time with the catapult. So that may be why they took it away, but I'd like to see it back. Moving on, we have a bit of the new mechanics for the new races. Now, Lionheart, I'm not sure how familiar you are with the notion of the Skaven Under-Empire.
I have heard of it.
So, for those of you who don't necessarily know, the Skaven obviously don't exist, but if they did...
Rat men are just tails.
Yeah, exactly. If they did, the Skaven, particularly in the old world, I'm not necessarily what the new world Skaven Empire looks like, but particularly under the old world, they have under cities underneath human cities and dwarf cities. So Karak, or Karak 8 Peaks even, has a Skaven section, it has a Gobbo section, and so it's kind of split between two levels. And Altdorf as well has an under Altdorf, which is a Skaven city. Now, I've done a full like chat about this, but essentially I'd like to see a mechanic, whereas now here's a bit of a call from the past. I think they still make these games, Lionheart, but I don't know if you've ever played it. A series called Heroes of Might and Magic.
Oh, yeah.
And you used to be able to go to like an underground campaign map, and on the campaign map, it had a lot of similarities with Total War. You'd be a champion on a horse, and you'd go around and you'd have your army. But you used to be able to go to an underground map, which only took up, say, 1/8 of the space of the overworld map. So resource-wise, not hugely intensive to create. But I'd like the idea of you being able to go underground into the Skaven Empire, fight them within their tunnels. They'd obviously have a number of different distinct advantages, but also to create a new kind of battle where, say I'm Karl Franz, I'm in Altdorf, and I'm aware that Skaven are underneath me, maybe through a Skaven meter or kind of like similar to a corruption meter. And then I take an army and I try and besiege the Skaven underneath me and clear them out from my swords and from the ground underneath. But that's a very advantage fight to them. It would be kind of like a siege, but done slightly differently. And I think that would be a very cool mechanic. And it would allow you to mix like the old, like crumbling tunnels of the Dwarven Empire, mixed with the Skaven tunnels, mixed with, and even the Empire has some underground trade routes that they use. So you could really create a fascinating mechanic around that. But that's one of the things that putting on my they have finite amount of resources hat might seem unlikely, but would be a fantastic surprise to see. I'm not sure what your thoughts are on that, on having to fight like extra siege battles underneath your own city, whether you think that's practical or not.
I mean, I'm not sure if we'll see extra ones underneath. Something I've kind of hoped is that it depends how, I guess, how heavy and full on their implementation of Skaven is into the games. But I've kind of thought that on a light medium implementation of sort of Skaven and their mechanics in the Under-Empire would be, there'd almost be like a corruption level to your cities. And if it reached a certain level, basically say Grimgor's attacking Altdorf, Karl Franz is defending, halfway, I don't know, within like say 10 minutes of that siege, the Greenskins have just got up onto the walls and they're starting to push through. Suddenly you have this eruption of Skaven forces coming up through the sewers, and kind of just turning it then into a free-for-all.
Well, that's very much how I envisage kind of the Skaven fighting their way up. And it would be, and they could come out from like points within the city as you're being sieged from the outside.
And just
that ability as Skaven
flood and overwhelm you, and not just kind of they'll attack both of you, but I mean really turn it into a solid free for all. Just the team locks are gone. You know, the orcs are just like, what are these rat things? Let's kill them. And Karl Franz is like, we've got to fall back and hold the square against against the Skaven,
exactly.
and the greenskins that are charging from the front gate. That's kind of what I want to see. I want to just see it so that, especially kind of in the way that we talked about sieges, that even if they're not really, if not much has changed about them, at least this would add another kind of dimension to them, where you have to fear what's coming at you from in front of you and above, but also now below, and so you've got to keep that Skaven meter low or whatever. I don't know how you can. I would in a way almost say maybe it's something the player can't stop, and that every so often Skaven will erupt during your sieges, the worst possible timing, and attack you. Or maybe at the beginning of your turn it will suddenly come through and suddenly you'll be like, my lord, there are stirrings under Altdorf, we must go, and then suddenly it sparks a battle and you're fighting Skaven within your own settlements. You can't use the towers to hold them off because they're already in the city, they're underneath you.
I think a mechanic whereby Skaven can attack from within your city has to be something they bring in.
But
the sort of like, again, putting on the pessimist hat, I'd be so disheartened if all they did was make Skaven a race that operated above ground and then just gave them that teleporting thing that the dwarves and the orcs have. I'd just be like,
underway stance, but no.
You can do better than that.
I kind of like that, because Skaven will work well for underway stance. You're having an underway battle between goblins and dwarves, and then suddenly Skaven pour out as well. I just literally want Skaven to be everyone's enemy and just cause maximum chaos, maximum threat all the time. But I guess
I'm slightly surprised that there are actually, well, maybe not. I thought they were going to be introduced very much like Chaos were. Not necessarily with the pre-order thing, because that didn't go particularly well.
I hope they're not pre-order.
But with the idea that they're the big bad at the end of Total War Warhammer 2, like they turn up and there's like Skaven all over the place. Because they do kind of emerge they sort of spread disease. This is kind of their modus operandi. They kind of spread a plague, kill off a majority of the population, and then they attack a world, a surface. So they've done it to the Empire before, and they've done it to the Lizard Men very famously, just by spreading a plague. So there could be, have there been, if I remember correctly, I think, did Medieval have a plague mechanic? I can't remember. I'm trying to rack my brain.
There was a plague mechanic. You get a little rat icon by your cities, and you take attrition, I think.
Yeah,
people would die every turn. That
should definitely, if there is, I'd be surprised if they didn't bring that back for the Skaven to be able to use and spread plague from a city to a city, to kind of dwindle down the population and even hamper growth of some settlements. So that could be quite interesting. But so yeah, we have the Skaven Under-Empire, and talking about sort of systems that have been in previous games, a lot of the Skaven economy and the Dark Elf economy is built on slave labor. So we have had slavery mechanics in Total War before. The last one I remember is Rome 2, and I think all that did was it would increase your population, but also increase unrest. Is that right, Lionheart?
Yes.
I'm not sure if there was one in Attila or a more modern one that they may borrow from, but that's the one I remember, the Rome 2 one.
Yeah.
So they might do something like that, but I'm not, I think they might make it, there's a chance they might make it a bit more complicated than that, but maybe not. Maybe they just keep it as that for slaves. You increase your population in the Dark Elf cities and Skaven cities, but unrest goes up and there's more likely to be a rebellion.
Yeah.
So we might get something very similar to that in terms of slavery mechanic. It's something we've seen in Total War before. But next, moving on to multiplayer. Army customization. Now, I never played multiplayer Shogun 2, but I believe Shogun 2 was the one where everyone says they hit it out the park, and it was great.
Yeah, they had something called the Avatar Conquest system, and also the way you played multiplayer. You could just do standard pick units from each of the factions and fight, but they had this system where you fought with specific units, and they gained experience, and they had a real kind of role-playing element. They leveled up, they gained more veterancy, they unlock customizations for the units, and it seemed like a really big step forward for the future of multiplayer in Total War games, and then it got dropped. My only, weirdly as it sounded, as popular as it was, my only thought couldn't be that the reason why they dropped it is that not enough people were playing it in the end.
Yeah. Because
that's the only logical thing that makes sense, because it is a community favorite now that is brought up whenever there's a developer saying, on a Reddit post something saying, what would you like to see? Give us suggestions, feedback. It's always Avatar Conquest for multiplayer, and they're like, just give us what Shogun 2 had, because it also had a campaign map which you fought over to take territory, and that helped you unlock more of the units. So it's kind of like your own personalized story mode of unlocking new units and then increasing the units you could then wield against other enemies. And there were clans and stuff where your clan had to try and take over the map. I thought it's a really clever implementation, and I kind of feel it would be perfect for Warhammer. Yeah. You'd fight under the banner of one of the various factions, and try and take territory on this thing, and you could have your own custom units, give them extra abilities. But I guess that it's just too much development time, because that's almost a game in itself. And maybe that's what CA want to do more with Arena, because that's kind of what you get. You level up your troops and stuff like that. But I do think that it is something that, if they don't do for Warhammer, I think it's something they need to revisit at some point, because, I mean, just for me, multiplayer, I would say maybe the reason why they don't dedicate so many resources to multiplayer is because not many people play it. The reason why people don't necessarily play it so much is because it's not changed. Yeah. In fact, it's got less. There's no free-for-all. There's no like King of the Hill mode or anything like that. We had free-for-all in Rome and Medieval too, and free-for-all is a big thing. I mean, I did a podcast, a Warcast podcast, where I talked about sort of things we wanted to see as well in that, and we were all shouting at the end of it, but I was like, give us free-for-all, because again, in terms of things that should surely be able to easily be implemented, you just turn off teams. You turn off the team lock. And I know the thing is, in a way, I think they just need to redo the UI of multiplayer battles for Total Wars and go back to the Medieval 2 system, where you went in and everyone was set to a team. And then if you wanted to 2v2 with someone, you just set yourself to both the team 1 or both the team 2. I think go back to those teams, because then you can just all choose to be a different team, and instantly you've got free-for-all, which is an insanely fun game mode. And I think with Skaven, it's almost it's a must-have. Skaven, you know, will go after everything and anyone. You know.
And I think because there was, even on the tabletop, there was a mode called Triumph and Treachery, which was a way of playing the tabletop game with 3 versus like free for all against each other with 3 or 4 or 5 armies, and you'd have cards that would screw each other over and stuff like that. So it is known to happen in the universe. Surely
one of the great things about the tabletop is in a way is that obviously you can play the official rules, but also you can make up your own game modes. You know, you've got the models. You can just decide I'm doing this today, and we're doing this, and it's a 3v1 scenario or something like that. Just the ability to kind of create more modes. I mean, one of the devs was actually tweeting out on Twitter a while back saying, you know, give me suggestions of things you'd like to see in a future Warhammer title. And I said King of the Hill, and then they tweeted back to me and sort of said, how would you see that implemented? And I said, well, you've already got capture points, so just give each player or each team of players say 200 points. To an icon at the top of the screen, and if they get in the capture point at the top of the hill or at the the top of the castle or whatever it is that you're king of, if you stay in that zone with no one else coming in, your points start ticking down. It's the first one to get to 0.
Yeah.
Now you've already got capture points in the game. It would require a few UI tweaks and a countdown timer, and I think again you need to go back to the system where you designate multiplayer people by teams rather than set sides of left and right and things like that, just to have it totally unlocked and you can choose what you want to do. And I kind of feel that's, again, I mean, I'm probably being really, there's probably like lots of, if devs watch this, they'd be like, it's so not that easy to do. Yeah. And I'm sure it's not. I'm sure it is days, weeks, if not months of development time potentially to implement some of these features. But I honestly am a firm believer that the reason why a lot of people don't play multiplayer is because it's a stale experience now. There is nothing new to it. In fact, there is less in it. There is people don't play sieges, as we've already said, because they're dull. They're very repetitive.
But I think there's a huge hunger for multiplayer.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd love to see the stats for, because I think Warhammer, perhaps more than any other recent game, at least they've put out, I guess multiplayer was more popular, because I think so. I just get that impression.
I think,
but also the amount of people who love watching multiplayer games, sort of on YouTube and things like that, it's just to such a degree that I think a lot of people are just looking to get into it more. Yeah. But it's just a bit of a, it's not as easy as perhaps they'd like. But I think there's a huge potential there, and hopefully with the sort of take up of multiplayer in Total War Warhammer, particularly, they might sort of address these elements. Now, I meant to ask you about with Avatar mode in Shogun 2, were you able to kind of like design your own banners and flags and like the colors of your troops and stuff like that?
You could set your own. You could set your own colors. I'm trying to think. I think there was a Mon editor, because it was your banner. I think there was a Mon editor. I'm trying to think.
Because I think people would love that in Total War Warhammer, because it takes you back to kind of the roots of the tabletop.
Yeah. Well, the biggest argument is, why isn't there an army painter?
Yeah,
I mean, a lot of people are going, when's the Army Painter DLC? People are expecting it almost as DLC. So I'm kind of in a way, just give the people what they want. Make a DLC where you customize.
Yeah, and they've shown, and we've seen like with the sort of the contrast colors and stuff, that they have the palettes, they have the exchangeable color palettes there.
Yeah, well,
for you to use for your armies.
You could kind of do it. You just have to create your own mod of units each time and all load up with it. So you could have your own custom color palette with the units each time. It's kind of
yeah, it's just one of those things that seemed like, guys, come on.
Yeah, this is. I mean, in a way, you could make quite a lot of money with this. People are going to pay to do their own custom. I mean, not necessarily saying it should be DLC. It would be great if it was a free thing that just came with it to add customization. But I'm pretty sure people would buy it. You know, if it's a thing of going, oh, I'm not sure people buy it, you're going to buy it. People are going to buy, you know, the opportunity to customize units. I mean, in terms of the grand scheme of things people will pay for. People pay for portrait DLC in Paradox games.
Oh god, I saw that entire.
So people are definitely going to buy an army painter DLC.
Slightly off the beaten path of multiplayer is one thing that they have to be able to do that's just in line with other games is make these magic items visible on the model.
Oh my god. Don't start me. Don't. Like, I also want them to go back.
A sword. I'd like to see what.
I want them to go back to Medieval 2 standard of, you know, when you upgrade a unit with better blacksmithing stuff of increased sword and shield, that changed their armor model. You could have. You had peasant bowmen that went from in their leather jerkins to, you know, padded armor. Then they went to scale mail or chain mail, and then they had like full on plate mail if you upgraded them to gold tier weapons and armor. And that was freaking cool. That was so cool. You saw a visual change. And the thing is, I cannot understand why in a game where they've added that roleplay perspective.
You just can't see the interchange
to your heroes and stuff, where you equip them with different items and armors. Why doesn't that change how they look? Why? Maybe
there's not even so many magical items.
Yeah,
they're not randomly generated.
And it's just the fact that you start with Karl Franz going, I must do the quest for Gal Maraz. Mate, you've got it in your hand.
Yeah,
it's been there. It doesn't change. It doesn't even get a slightly different color around it. Like,
or even Alberic when he gets his trident and he's holding a trident.
I mean, part of me wonders, is it potentially a licensing thing with Games Workshop saying that you can't alter how they look because that's how the models look? So you can't do Karl Franz without Gal Maraz because he has Gal Maraz. You can't do Alberic without his trident because.
But then again, they give you options on the tabletop. So there was the option to equip Karl Franz with the Runefang.
Which
is one of his, which is another unique item
you
can only have, and he swaps out. And that would just be a kind of and a lot of people do the thing where they magnetize their models, so you can swap out arms and things.
Yeah.
For how you equip your.
I mean, I only ever did 40k models, but I'd attach all sorts of different arms and weapons to my Space Marines and stuff.
Exactly,
because you can. That is the premise of it. You equip anything to them, and then you create your custom character. And okay, this time he's got a power lance or whatever instead of a power sword. You know.
So it just seems like that was one of the things that baffled me, and the fact, and what was a weird one recently was with the Bretonia one, where you have the lady. And she gets her cup, and in all the promotional stuff, she's holding a cup. But in the actual game, she's never holding that cup at all. She doesn't even have it. She's
so drunk, she's dropped a cup.
Yeah, exactly. She's just
off her tits.
She's high on life.
Yeah, she's gone. She's gone. That's why she's floating. She thinks she's floating. She's actually crawling along the ground, just like I'm so pissed. Too much wine.
One other gripe for multiplayer for me is. I mean, it's not really a gripe because I don't judge people who do it because it's within the rules of the game, and you're trying to put this forward start is the idea of the hero spam issue.
Yeah, I think the thing is, again, kind of with this, I think they missed an opportunity of just creating an option where when you set up a host a multiplayer game, there's a rule page, and you can put on limits of units then.
That's exactly what I was
so heroes, you just put one notch to the right, and it goes limitation of heroes 1 or limitation of amber with 1. I mean, it'd be a long list to cover all the units depending on the faction, but maybe people then could import, you know, rule sets, and there'd be tournament leagues because you just import or activate this mod that activates that rule set or something. I think that's something that could also be added in.
I think being able to select like amount of heroes and maybe even go a little bit deeper, like the type of hero, because I can understand having 2 different sorts of wizards, but having like 4 different paladins is
just restrict it to like 1 paladin max. I mean, because we've as Total War players been doing it for years of going, I remember like Napoleon stuff, I'd be like 2 arty max, 5 light infantry, and that's what you type into the chat when the game first started, because people would be like rules, and you'd be like that's the rules. So I think it's maybe about time that the player was given that option, the host of the game was given that option. When you set up a game, maybe it takes an extra 10 minutes to set up the game because you've got to go through and you've got to set your own rules, but then you can save that as a preset rule list, and then you just come and tweak it. So you can go through, you'd go through all the factions.
Just display that when someone comes into the game as well, so they don't necessarily have to ask what the rules are. Or
exactly, and then you're ready to go because then they can't select over the thing, and they're like, oh right, that's clearly the rule for this thing. That's I think the user being able to actually interact and set rule lists and locks and bans and stuff would be really useful.
Yeah, I think that's a solution to the problem. Because I think leave the option open if people want to have games where they do have 4 or 5 paladins and 2 wizards and whatever have you. Let them do that, but also just let people just be able to easily with a click set rules and just to cut out the issue of hero spam. Because once it happens to you, if you're just trying to have like a normal game, like with an army as you'd build one on campaign, and someone rocks up with like just paladins or something, it's like, oh great, okay, there goes that game. That's out the window. Okay, so now we're moving on to new armies we might see in Total War Warhammer. Now we know the 4 main races, which are the High Elves, the Dark Elves, the Lizard Men, and probably the Skaven.
Heresy.
It will be the Heresy.
Heresy.
It will be the Skaven. Now, we kind of have to go back to the old Russian leak here for, like, just to inform my thinking on this argument in terms of what else we're going to see in terms of DLC races. Now, the problem here is the map. So the areas they're covering now, you guys will probably be seeing it after I edit this, a map I'll put up of the Warhammer world and try and visually show this to you. But the area they're covering is essentially what is on our world looks like the Americas, both North and South, and Africa. Now, the issue here is that the main races that they've listed, particularly on that Russian leak, there's not a lot of other races in the area they've chosen to cover in the Total War Warhammer map. Now, there are some like I don't want to say sub races, that sounds horrible, but races that weren't necessarily given their own army books in Warhammer Fantasy Battle, such as Araby, such as the Amazonians, and and maybe kind of the mercenary Tilia Estalia Dogs of War kind of element. And I think there's a chance we may see all of them, but we really haven't had a huge test of Creative Assembly just being like let go by Games Workshop and go, yeah, just create an army, do what you want. So I'm not sure what we are going to be able to see in terms of those new races. I think we will get Tomb Kings. I think that's a guarantee. But if we look back to that Russian leak, the only things left after those 4 initial ones that are coming in this game are Tomb Kings, Chaos Dwarves, and Ogres, I think, as far as I remember.
Yeah.
Now, that's going on the assumption that the hordes of the demon armies are going to be the 3rd game, which I think everyone kind of is rolling with, and it seems like that's the direction they're going in. So you'll have all the Chaos Gods represented in the last game. But that just kind of limits your option in terms of what we're going to see race-wise DLC in this version of the game, primarily because of geography. So if you guys just refer back to the map here, the area in blue is the 2nd game, and up here in the Darklands that just popped up is where the Chaos Dwarves are, and just to the west of them is the Ogre Kingdom's territory. Now, there is another army which hasn't been included in the game yet, which is Kislev, which has an army book. But they look likely to be included in the 3rd game simply because geographically it would be very difficult to attach the Chaos Dwarf Kingdom and the Ogre Kingdom to a campaign map for the Total War Warhammer 2 area that just encapsulated the areas in blue. It doesn't really fit on very well, and that's why I kind of suspect that the Chaos Dwarves and Ogre Kingdoms won't be seen until the 3rd iteration of the game. But yeah, as I said, I'd like to see Araby, and that's kind of, in case you don't know Lionheart, or if anyone who's listening who's not 100% sure, it's kind of like Saladin's armies during the Crusades, essentially is what that army's based on. Tilia and Estalia can be argued that I imagine we might see a similar like conquistador makeup.
Yeah.
But they didn't really have official army books, and a lot of their armies were made up of this Dog of War book, which is essentially a mercenary force, which I was a little bit disappointed when they introduced the Regiments of Renown, that they didn't just use the Dogs of War book for the mercenaries elements, as they have done in previous games. But yeah, so I'm a little bit up in the air in terms, because we won't, from what I can figure out, there's no way they get as many, they won't like Beastmen, Wood Elves, kind of these classic armies. There's not as many in this region of the world.
I'm wondering if we're not going to get too as many DLCs for 2, just because, and unless it's extra legendary lords and just unique heroes, I think they might kind of be small in nature. Maybe, I don't know. Kind of feel that maybe there's enough to do Tomb Kings on the scale of a Beastmen or Wood Elves sort of thing, with a mini campaign.
Yeah, Tomb Kings is a full army book. Tomb Kings is a surefire thing for what's going to be in this
that
one.
will be a DLC unlock for them.
Now, I will also argue that, just because I know someone's going to mention this, is that Araby did have an army book in a game called War Master, which is kind of like an epic scale version of Fantasy Battle that they did, I think, in early 2000s. But again, that's not necessarily direct Fantasy Battle army book. which seems to be the limitations of CA to a certain extent, particularly if you're looking at the Man of War licensing thing as the issue if they're not doing naval combat. But I think it would be fun to see them. It's just a matter of like, I would be super excited if Games Workshop just like, oh yeah, CA, go for it. Just go off the leash, create whatever you want. We've seen them create some new units like the Hippogriff Knights, which aren't necessarily in the Bretonnia army book. So there is that possibility. So I think that would be good. But I think what we might see more in Total War Warhammer 2 Lionheart is reintroductions of the old races.
Yeah.
Now, I'd be a bit miffed if they sell them as race packs.
Yeah.
But you could sell them as Legendary Lord packs. So, for example, there's very famous like conflict between a greenskin war boss called Grom the Paunch, who's a gobbo who ate a troll and became massive because the troll flesh grew inside him.
Oh, I can't wait for the voice acting on that.
And he had a very famous expedition to Ulthuan, the home of the High Elves. And there's a very famous conflict with him and a guy called Elfarion, who's a elf hero. Now I see that being, and now he's actually called Elfarion the Grim. And I may mention this in another one of my videos, but I think I recently just finished my High Elf one, and I mentioned it in that. But him being called Elfarion the Grim, I don't see them not naming a DLC pack The Grim and the Green.
That would be cool. That would be cool.
So I kind of see that, and then that would allow people to play as greenskins in that map. So that would be okay if you sell that as a Legendary Lord pack, and then just have the races reintroduced that way. That's why there is a hope that we see Luther Harkon, the vampire pirate, reintroducing the undead into the Total War Warhammer 2 map.
Was thinking about how they do it, because they did the duo packs of Grim and the Grave with Volkmar and Gorst and what have you, and then they did Belegar versus Skarsnik. Were Belegar and Skarsnik like that major in the tabletop, or were they kind of quite sub stuff that they were just...
No, Gorst is like the least known one. Like when they brought out Gorst, I was like, what?
I'd say, well...
But he was like from a little campaign, I think like Sigmar's Heir or something like that. It was in the run up to the end times, which gets us into dangerous territory. Let's not delve into that. So Gorst was probably the least known character they brought into it. But Belegar and Skarsnik and a Skaven called...
established.
Are established particularly over their fight of Karak 8 Peaks.
Yeah, because I'm just wondering how many of those kind of mini stories do you think that might be, if we're saying that there may not be a lot of like big faction packs for DLC, do you reckon there'll be lots of Grim and the Grave, King and the Warlord, Grim and the Green sort of thing that they'll do? They'll pick up these characters from stories or little excerpts from lesser known parts of the Warhammer lore and make them as fully fledged campaigns and stuff.
I think there aren't necessarily as many direct conflicts. Like Elfarion and Grom the Paunch are the one that jumped to mind most immediately. There would also be the Prophet of Sotek and Lord Nurglich, who is the leader of Clan Pestilence, and they had a very famous conflict within the lands of the Lizard Men, and that will probably be called something like the Rat and the Viper or something along those lines. But there are lords they could just chuck in for like just nonsense reasons, like the Everqueen, who, I mean, we know who the starting legendary lords are for the High Elves. It's these two twins, Tyrion and Teclis. And the Everqueen is kind of a very important character in that world. And there's another well-known female character in the Dark Elf army. I'm going on the assumption that the starting lords for the Dark Elves are Malekith and Marathi, so the weirdest mother-son duo in fantasy. There's some creepiness going on there, but there's another character there called Helbrun.
Let's see where this is gonna go.
And there's another female character there called Helbrun. They might chuck in Helbrun and the Everqueen just for larks and throw them in together, just because they're two women, and I think that'd be a bit weaker. But I do see them doing that particularly for the 4 starting races. Doing that again now. But that's how I see them reintroducing the races. I hope that's how they do it, through Lord packs. Because if they try to sell a race pack, I think people will be. Do you
think there's a chance? Because for the Lizmen, it's Lord Mazdamundi as the legendary lord. Me and Moosey were talking about the ancient and venerable Lord Kroq, but obviously he's long since passed.
Yeah,
by the
Lord
time
Kroq is a bit of a weird one.
But do you reckon there's a possibility he might be kind of brought in or something like that?
I think he will definitely be brought in. It's a matter of how he's brought in.
Yeah.
So he is dead.
Because some people were suggesting they were going to reanimate his bones or something like that, and you'd have him as kind of an ethereal sort of
well, what
great
you could
slan.
have like an ethereal like Lord Kroq like buzz around his dead body. That would be quite funny.
Yeah.
Because the idea is his spirit is still just hanging around his body. But I think he can only cast, if I remember correctly on the tabletop, I think he can only kind of cast like one spell, and he doesn't really speak, and it's a devastating spell. So I see him maybe even more as like a kind of Mortis engine kind of, maybe a regiment of renowned, necessarily than a legendary lord, because you could put the argument he can't really command units, so he's dead and doesn't speak. But yeah, Lord Kroq is a fantastic character, just essentially a big mummified toad corpse being carted around.
Just a massive, super powerful mage. I mean, again, coming back to what we first said about magic needing to be boosted, it needs to be overhauled massively, surely, for the Lizardmen and for the Slan, because they're just they're mages on steroids, right?
If you applied the rules for characters from Total War Warhammer 1 to Total War Warhammer 2, we'd have to like have double the size upgrade trees. It just wouldn't necessarily work.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the most we have at the moment is Manfred with the 2 laws of magic. Now, if you were doing particularly like the Mazdamundi properly, you'd have to like have him have all 8. So it would get really weird. He'd just have the biggest upgrade tree plus high magic, which is a law of magic they'll be bringing in with the next game, I'm sure. So I think what we're going to see is, I can't remember who it was, but we've seen, I think it was not the Dryads, is it the Dryads, the tree wraiths? Branch wraiths?
Yeah, branch wraiths.
Who had like a kind of a hybrid magic law branch, where it was like a mix of not dark magic. It was a kind of a mix of 2 magic laws. And I think we might see a bit of that going on.
Okay.
But we should get more magical spells.
Which means we're going to need more skill points.
Yes. True, but I mean, I always play with I have to confess, I always play with the extra skill point mod myself these days.
I mean, I
know you don't particularly like it.
I don't mind it if there were enough options to. Well, if there were lots of different ones that I would. I mean, maybe they could add in a way where you can actually, maybe you can earn skill points by getting, say, heroic victories or something like that.
Yeah,
rather than just once you've hit maximum level or something like that, you can get more. But the reason why I don't it's mainly because a lot of my viewers that suggest I use the mod that I give, say, 60 skills rather than 30 points, is it's like then you can get all the skills, and I'm kind of like that's pointless, because I want I want to create my character in a certain way. I want him to be a specialized melee fighter, or I want him to be a support. I don't want him to be a master of everything, because I kind of feel that sucks the character from him. But if there were, I think I wouldn't mind more skill points if they added more skills, so you still couldn't get all of them. I think that's the way to do it. If they add in more so you can't get all of them, then that's still fine, because you still have to specialize to which ones you want.
I think if they do have, and that's the problem they're going to run into, particularly with these more powerful magic users, is if you nerf them. And I will say the Bretonia stuff didn't fill me with confidence, because the drunken
Fey Enchantress?
Fey Enchantress, that's it. That's what I was looking for.
Oh, the drunken, we're talking about
the drunken Fey Enchantress.
Yeah.
She was meant to have several laws of magic, which they could have fit in. Like, I mean, if Manfred can have 2, just throw another one in there. And they didn't even go that far with her. They just gave her 1, which kind of made me a bit like, oh no.
Oh dear. Oh no. No.
I'd love to. Hopefully they do give them more, and like they would have to tweak the upgrade tree there, but maybe what they would do for the more powerful magic users is tie some of the campaign benefits into some of their magic. So if you get a spell, you also get a campaign benefit with that spell. Yeah. Something like that. You'd have to tweak it quite severely. And I think really that just brings us on quite nicely into the last bit, sort of the global map, which I'm probably the most excited thing I'm about for the next game, is the combination of the old world and the new. And how big can that get? Now, in my experience, the biggest map I think I've seen in a Total War game is Rome 2. Now, Empire, apparently there was a weird mechanic around that where you'd go to the new world or something like that.
So Empire, you had what were called theaters of war. So you had the kind of regular, like, medieval 2 European map. As the base game map for Empire, but then you basically could go down to like the bottom left where there was the mini map of the world map, or of the European map, and you'd hit like an arrow on it, and it would go over to the Americas, and you had like North America and a bit of South America as well, and then you could press it again. You'd also go over to India. So if you combined all of those, I don't know if, because there weren't that many regions, as some of the newer ones. So, I mean, in terms of scale, Empires is still the largest we've ever seen.
Okay.
But this is going to eclipse that.
So was each one of those regions kind of the size of the Rome 2 map then?
No, like, the European one was still the biggest.
Yeah.
The American one was the next the next largest, and then India was just India basically.
Now, would you like to kind of see that, or would you like to see it just an integrated map? I think I'd prefer.
I mean, I think the reason why they had Theatres of War was purely like a technical limitation at the time. It would have just tanked your frame rate having all those regions, kind of basically being rendered in there. I think that there is no need to have Theatre of War, now, because I think the technology's come along where they can, not
I think I saw somewhere, was it on the Q&A, they mentioned they were working on efficiencies to make like the AI turns go a bit quicker.
Yeah, to just work on it. I think they said that AI turns for the mega campaign or whatever they're calling it will be maybe the tiniest bit longer, but it shouldn't be anything more dramatically long. And I mean, loading end turn times are pretty fast for Total Warhammer. And I would highly say, as a worthwhile investment to any PC gamer, get yourself an SSD to put the game on, because it makes a world of difference with end turn times, with loading in and out of battles, to the point where when I was doing a co-op with Warrior of Sparta, when we first got it, I think it was nearly taking him like 4 minutes to load out of the battle. I bought him an SSD and sent it to him. Because I was just like, dude, like we're spending like 10 minutes nearly going in and out of battles, just waiting for it, and we're running out of stuff to talk about. Yes, we could cut that stuff out, but just SSD. If you're having really slow loading times with anything, Total War stuff, buy an SSD, put it on there. You can get like 120 or 240 gig
you're
one.
arguing against yourself like that. How do I check my battle results if I get an SSD?
I know exactly. Well, they need to put a bloody continue button in. Damn it! Don't. Yeah, that's the pitfall of that. But
I'm very much looking forward to this grand campaign idea.
This should be insane.
Could be incredible, particularly if you bring in all your DLC from the first game.
Mean, they've said that there might be. I think they've said that the old world map will be exactly the same, pretty much.
Yeah.
In terms of size, the new world might just lose a little bit of the bottom. Because it's a slightly different shape, and because it's slightly more rectangular than kind of an even square.
Well, then this brings me back to a slight concern. Then is do you remember? I don't know if you ever saw it, but with the Russian leak, there was also a map leaked along with it that kind of had it. But like in terms of like cutting off a little bit at the bottom, it cut off like most of Lustria and like left you like just the western edge of Nagorov. But I think they might expand
recent
on that, to be fair.
Total War Live they had Al Bickham on, and he was explaining that you'll lose a little bit of the southern part of Lustria, and they have to give one of the legendary lords a slightly different starting position.
Okay,
but
I'm excited because I imagine, because this game did very well, so I imagine no matter what plans they had at the beginning, there's umpteen amounts to expand on it and to make these maps bigger than they planned on necessarily originally.
Yeah, I think the whole thing has gotten a lot bigger. I mean, when I did my video about just the announcement of Warhammer 2, I sort of said, now these are going to be fully fledged games. A lot of people said, oh, they were always going to be fully fledged games, and I could swear I remember when they first started saying that there'd be reasonable sized standalone expansions.
Yeah.
Whereas now I honestly do feel, as we said at the start, these are nearly their own full fledged titles. I feel that's bigger than a standalone expansion. I kind of feel what they are now. Yes, you'll probably still call them a standalone expansion, but I kind of feel that they're more than that almost. They're in between a standalone expansion and a brand new IP Total War game, basically.
Yeah.
I don't know what the term is for that, and even if there is one or not. But I feel
they actually ended up calling it Total War Warhammer 2 and not Total War Warhammer New World Edition or something like that.
Yeah, because I mean, I threw a mock together logo of that.
Old World Edition renaming.
Yeah, because it makes sense that we've got the Old World Edition. Well, unless they're just literally going to go through where we've got Total Warhammer 1, it came out, and then we had the Old World Edition, and then Warhammer 2 will come out, and then they'll do their final free DLC update of it, and it'll be called the New World Edition. Yeah. It would be nice. I mean, in terms of like marketing bookends, that's a really nice way of doing it. So I guess we'll have to wait and see on that. One thing I do really like, I mean, that we didn't have to include in this list of things we'd like to see, is something they've already announced they're already going to do, is every legendary lord now has, well, in Warhammer 2 will have its own start position.
Yeah.
So we are not going to have one of the big issues that people had at the start of Warhammer 1 when it launched, is that Gelt and Franz are in the same starting location, you can't co-op as the same faction with a friend. Now you will be able to, because, and they did this with Wood Elves, and again, this is where, you know, come back to my point where you can start seeing what they're working on, what they're developing, because they did it with Wood Elves. They had
Durthu, with Bretonnia, you saw not a single, they didn't start.
Yeah, they're all separate ones, yeah. So you've seen it with Bretonnia as well. So I love that they've done that, because not only is that great for a single player experience, because it means that every campaign, at least is from the very start, is slightly different. Even if even if within turn 2 you conquer the same territory next door, the start is different for every single legendary lord, because you choose a different one, and for co-ops you can choose a different one. It even opens up more possibilities for verses, you know, going on. So
I think particularly on the because I think it will be very similar to sort of the Bretonnian Wood Elf issues with the Vortex. Let's call it the Vortex map, which is just the Total War Warhammer 2 map. But I think it opens up just so many possibilities on the Grand Campaign map. I mean, if you're talking like Skaven, you can have like, I have some theories about who the legendary lords for Skaven will be, but if my theories are correct, you could have one starting in the old world and one starting in the new, and that would be two completely different Skaven experiences in terms of campaigns. That would be insane on that one.
And I think that's a good, you know, a good hope to have, because they've already said there's going to be slight tweaks to legendary lord positioning for the mega campaign to the individual campaigns, because they've said, you know, they're going to have to move one of the Lizardmen legendary lords to a different start position because they have to cut a little bit of the map off. So I think it would be perfectly reasonable to try and integrate the whole massive sandbox experience that it will be by, you know, having, you know, one or two of the new races legendary lords be over or closer to the old world. Just to really involve you all. I mean, it's going to be really exciting, I think, that alone. And I was actually slightly surprised that they announced that this would be coming out a few weeks after the launch of Warhammer 2. I kind of wouldn't have put it past them to wait until Warhammer 3 had come out, and they just go, we're just going to do it in one big thing. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense to do it, you know, piece by piece. It actually makes way more sense to do it that way. I don't know kind of why I thought it would be at the end.
Well, here's an issue with we are getting into maybe a completely different video topic with Total War Warhammer 3 speculation. But I think that I'm interested, because I have a suspicion that Total War Warhammer 3 might have to just have the Grand Campaign map and just include that in the package, even if you own one or two or not, because if it just concentrates on chaos, the only way to really do that is to go back to the old world, unless you're doing the whole world. So they might. I'm interested to see how they handle that. But it presents a whole different bunch of challenges. I think
we'll do that in another video. Yeah,
we'll do that in another video.
We'll be back
in terms of what the third game might look like. But yeah, I think we're both very excited about it. Even if we don't see even if they maybe had 3 or 4 of the things we put in this list, I'd be happy with that as an iteration on the first game.
What would your top thing be from the stuff we've discussed that you'd want them to put in Warhammer 2?
My top, that's a good one. I think let's put map variation and sieges together as like number 1. That would be number 1, and I think after that, I'd like to see them boost magic, probably for me.
Yeah.
And then if I had to pick a third, I'd love to see army customization in multiplayer. I think with the paid thing, those would be my top. What about you?
I think it's sieges, and you know, a map variation of river and bridge battles is definitely number 1. It's a core part of the game that is really lacking. I think then I have to agree, magic as well. It needs to be made. It needs to scale properly, and it's going to need some tweaking for the slan anyway. And then third and final would just be multiplayer modes. You know, free for all. Go back to that team list set up for how you group players together for 1v1s, 2v2s, 3v3s, 4v4s. You know, enable those free for all options, and King of the Hill. Because I think, or some other variation of that mode, because I think that will drive a lot more players to multiplayer. And also they have started implementing their fixes for this, the leaderboard fixes about the, you know, people drop hacking and things like that on the leaderboards.
We actually didn't mention any of that. Yeah,
because they have started to deploy kind of countermeasures about that now, but it's too late. You know, that's, you know, once Warhammer 2 comes out, yeah, sure, people will still be playing with those factions and it might revive it a bit, but they need to have that fixed and lock down a proper solution for that, because they've not had one for that since they moved to the new system with like Empire. And they need to really get on top of, if they're gonna, because otherwise there's no point in them bothering with a ranked board, basically. And I think it's a nice feature to have, but it needs to be, you know, if someone drops from a game, you need to just have a system where it punishes the player for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, okay, so we all have internet drops and disconnections now and then. Maybe there's a way where you can I don't know, submit I don't know, a claim, but you could be like, oh, my internet dropped or something like that, and you can only do one of those, I don't know, 1 or 2 of those a day or something like that, so it would stop people just doing it all the time, or other players can... a reporting system. I think the multiplayer, just the way you interact with other players and multiplayer itself in Total War needs to have a bit of an overhaul to it, but whether or not they'll get budget and focus for that is you know, kind of a big concern.
I think a lot of that rides on just what the sort of player stats are in terms of how many people are playing multiplayer at the moment. And yeah, I'm just looking forward to seeing what they do. Hopefully, they do a few of these, if not most of them. Yeah. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to see what they come up with. And yeah, I think that'll about sum us up there. And I just want to say a big thank you to Lionheart. Your expertise was much appreciated, sir.
Thanks for having me on. It's great to discuss all the topics.
Yeah, I think we'll just both sort of cross our fingers. And what are you guessing? Next announcement, probably they want nothing till E3, or do you think they'll come out with bits and bobs?
I think it might be like tiny little minor stuff, but I think the next big thing is going to be around that E3 time, maybe just before E3, to kind of be like, this is what we're going to be showing at E3. Come see what we're more detail at E3. This is the next announcement. Come to E3 to actually see it, or maybe it will be after E3 once it's been, you know, shown there or whatever.
All right. And yeah, to the audience, thank you guys very much for tuning in. This was a bit of a long one, longer than I anticipated, but hopefully everyone found that interesting and enjoyed it. And hopefully catch you guys all on the next video. Yeah, and if you've been watching over on my side, go and check out the Inept General. His channel is linked in the description. And we'll do some more kind of speculation videos, maybe even a Warhammer 3 one as we started getting into it at the end soon. Yeah, indeed. Yeah, I think we both have a lot of thoughts on that one too. All right, that's it. Thanks very much, guys. Ciao for now.